And as you can see, I have a special video today. Well, the sun just ingressed together with Venus into Scorpio uh, to conjunct my natal Pluto. And I came with the urgent idea to do a complete video about Pluto across the zodiac. Mind you, that's not like the fully researched version. This is just me saying Pluto around the zodiac and coming up with whatever comes up. And this picture to begin with. And I'm going to take it from Pluto Aries. And I know Pluto is an. Let's talk about Pluto first. So I'm going to talk about the significations of Pluto. I don't remember exactly when it was discovered. I know that it was discovered alongside the inventions of A-bombs, if I'm not mistaken. And so Pluto and A-bombs are related. Um, the tagline for Pluto for me is touching the core of something to transform it. So when Pluto will cross the zodiac or crosses the zodiac, it touches at the essence of every signification of the sign and turns it over um, to sort of make it completely new and give it a new sense of power. So, power and power relations, that which we seek to dispose of, this is also our anus and our shit, as well as our trash. So, trash and feces. Hidden energy, power, emotions, taboo that are power related rather than mere sexuality related. Doesn't have to mean um, it doesn't have to mean sexual violence, by the way. It can also mean simply power related kinks. Um, like BDSM is about trust in an unequal power relation state rather than about sex. Removing shame around secrets and, of course, exposure of secrets and control. So, trying to control the exposure, using exposures as means to control, and so on and so forth. Evolution. It's also cell biology, nuclear energy, and energy is power. It's nuclear, but it's also psychic, um, regardless of where Pluto is. And that's important. And therefore, because it's also exposure, so it's exposure of the hidden mechanism, psychic and psychological, regardless of where Pluto is. So, one more shot of this beautiful dog, and let's continue. Going back. Pluto in Aries. Again, this is not the fully researched thingy, so I don't have the years. Just gonna go Pluto, Aries, and what comes up. So, Pluto Aries, heads being removed and mindsets being transformed. War weapons renovated, but also war. It's not necessarily war strategies, but more innovations related to war. Again, like nuclears, but it was not the Pluto in Aries, the nukes were way after that. Or, yeah. Um, there is the danger of might is right and being impulsive about something, but also it is the power of the mind and the mindset. So even the power of the mind, I don't know when was the I think therefore I am, but it might have been a Pluto in Aries. I need to check that. Um, the power of um, the power of the mindset, not in a Jupiterian way so much as sort of a winning mindset. Um, looking into our head to find the central something. Okay, so finding consciousness in the mind, the head, the brain. So that in terms of theory of consciousness. Pluto around Taurus. Whose voice has the power? This is money and politics. The transformative power of sensuality, of matter as well. The essence of possession as a relational paradigm. So, what does it mean to possess something? What does it mean that you have X? It can be a partner, so partner as possession, women as possessions, but also exposing the way people see women as possessions or the feminine as possessions. Okay, the power relation. Voices that are being heard or voices that are disempowered. Finding the power, finding your voice within this um, finances as well. So, if with Aries might is right, with Taurus, if you have the wealth, then you have the opinion, you have the voice. Your voice is heard if only if you are wealthy, or alternatively, exposing the wealth behind the voices. Okay. Why do we hear X on the radio all the time? Because so and so and so and so and so and so. So that is, but that is relating as X being a musician rather than X being, a politician or a certain types of journalism. That would already be the Pluto Gemini. And Pluto Gemini, the power of a good argument or a debate. Exposing the hidden mechanisms, the techniques of debate. What techniques debaters use? Just exposure of the core techniques of framing, the power of framing a situation, and the exposure of the power of framing a situation. Okay. Um, It can also be the other way around. It can also be making a controversy out of a statement which truth value should not be questioned, such as homicide yes or no debate, or rape yes or no debate. And I could bring another couple of triggering examples, but I don't think they're necessary. This can also mean declassification or leaking news that expose hidden powers. So again, who do we read on the news? What papers do we read? What is the power and perhaps also the money and the wealth behind the media? Um, and uh, this could also mean exposing journalists that have conducted misconducts of some sorts. And Gemini also rules children, so children needing to find their power, this can be a very difficult time or era for children. Um, and all kinds of things that, whether violence, abuse, and whatnot, that the children face, and the power it has over their lives, or as adults exposing the power that our childhood had over our lives. Not necessarily within the family. This is more, it can be within the family, but this is more, the focus is on the child and not on the family. The family is more Cancer. And Cancer is about caregiving, the power of a cozy place, of finding power and in developing emotional resilience. So, exposing our psychology, the effect of emotions on our well being, the deadly power of emotions. Okay? If in Um, in Gemini, it was perhaps the deadly power of trade, of media, of agreements, of debates, of framing and reframing. Cancer is the power of emotions. How are we being emotionally taken care of and using care as control? Okay, psychology of upbringing beyond erotic desire, but also power relations within the family or the nation, the motherland, the power of mothering and caregiving, and exposing abusive caregivers. Again, Pluto being both trying to control, trying to put aside uh, both the taboo and the exposure of a taboo. It's dual in its nature in this way. But it's not so dual in as much as it's transformative from one point to the 180. Completely new. Um, Anything more? Cancer, the power of intuition, certain hidden facets of emotional intuition, the feminine, the power of the moon, how we think about the moon, um, and that might relate to magical power, although, yeah, it might. It might. Um, how we view those who look at the moon, like astrologers as well. Nourishment, any type of nourishment. So this is also nourishment in terms of emotional caregiving, but also in terms of food, um, and then on a mundane level, humanitarian aid as means of control. Okay, providing food to those in need, but in the way that is controlling. Pluto in Leo. This is the leader as a performer, but the power of being that performer. That it's also an era of personal power. Politics becoming more personal. Leaders, dictatorship to a sense. Um, Use and abuse of solar figures, and the exposure of the abuse conducted by leaders. It can also mean decapitation of leaders and those in royal ranking. So this goes, I think, to the Second World War, the way it ended, and the sort of ending to an era of certain leaderships. You can think about Mussolini, you can think about Hitler, other leaders that had terminate their time on Earth together with the role that they were playing in history and being exposed um, for what they were doing. Um, it's also the power of the heart, of applying to the heart, of the ways the heart can be abused. So there can be, romantic crime, yeah. But I don't only mean romantic crime in the sense of against women. In general, romanticizing of crime. This can also be a Leo thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Scorpio thing. That which is hidden, the taboo, becomes romanticized and becomes pop culture in a way. Performing of the darker arts, like the femme fatale kind of energy. Um, Pluto Virgo. Words that heal and words that are deadly. So, using the power of words in cunning ways, the power of the little details. So, an attempt to use hidden power in words, such as gaslighting, leaves the mercurial, the person that tried that, exposed by the art of satire, for example, that accentuates the clarity of the hidden message. So it's something like somebody tries to put somebody to ridicule using little details and like hidden things, and then they do it hidden in secret, and then that being exposed in the public, for example, but and using those very details being accentuated, being absurd, being put to ridicule, being all using all the aesthetics of working with the details, actually um, to expose the what was done in in a way that that only the person receiving the abuse was supposed to see. That's one way. So misuse of spiritual power, healing power of words, leaves the person stripped of their healing power to be transformed by changing the ways with words. Violence against authors, ending up with the oppressor being disempowered by having books written for the public about the mechanism of misuse of words or healing or even herbal witchcraft. On the other hand, using words or herbal magic to combat undesirable, disempowering figures. Okay? So, this is both because of the nature of Pluto that is transforming from A to B. If you are on one end of the abuse, you might not necessarily end up on the other end of the abuse, but end up in a position where you could end up on the other way of the abuse. And because Mercury is so adaptive, then it adapts itself to Pluto. Okay? It adapts to Pluto. So it turns things around. It just does its little Mercury things where it's flipping and reversing, but this is flipping and reversing of the Pluto power in Virgo. So, and this is also true to, people who use witchcraft in ways that are to bring about damage to another and the danger of that turning up against them. Okay, both because of the nature that is mercurial and the Pluto, the hidden facets of magic. This is why I mentioned magic, because Virgo does deal with words and with herbs and healing and frequencies, and Pluto is hidden stuff. Okay, so the Pluto Virgo may find, or the Pluto Virgo might neglect the power of those hidden facets of reality, only to be transformed by them, and then decide, if they decide to use that power and to find the power using those things in order to find the power, not to disempower or to avoid finding their power, then they can be positively transformed. But then the danger lies in trying to use the power of the word in a way that that causes like hidden effects to the other person, trying to gaslight the person. If in Cancer it's or Scorpio it's to gaslight with behavior, here it is to gaslight with words. The word that can have a couple of meanings, and only the person that is intended or the group of people that are intended will understand the hurt, and so this is the type of stuff. But then there is, like an entire satire or a complete sketch song, or a perform not necessarily performance, but um, some satire going viral that basically accentuates what was done and kind of exposes and puts to ridicule the people who try to do that. So this can be something that if it involves like a Leo thing or a Leo, then it can become more noticeable. Um, so that with Virgo, again, both with Gemini and with Virgo, mercurial signs, so we have the flip it and reverse it kind of a thing. Okay, you try to frame somebody as something, and if that frame is disempowering, then it might be used against you. The power of framing, right? Um, Pluto in Libra. So the exposure of abusive artists, or the way art was used to actually abuse. Because we think about art as the voice is liberating. What about arts that present, let's say, the colonized person as some sort of an exotic animal? Okay, the exposure, the discussion of that, the critique of that type of art, these type of judges, business people, cultural appropriation, the personal is the political, so relationships at the courtroom and the exposure of legislation that disempowers groups of people, exposure of hidden hierarchies within the international arena or bodies that should be equal. Okay, so who has the power to achieve uh, equity in the face of the law? Or who are our judges? Could our judges be, pedophiles or so and so? Scandals around exposure of artists, judges, people whose image is important. So this can also be politicians because of diplomacy, and the hidden nature of diplomacy. Diplomacy. One of the sayings about this diplomacy is that war is the continuation of diplomacy in other means, but this could also be looked at as backwards. Diplomacy is war with words, with legislation, with policies. It's war with peace, it's using peace agreement to make a war, okay? That can also be something that is observed, that is looked at with Pluto in Libra. How are everything relational? Um, Also credit for creation because it's intellectual property in the sense, um, and the equity of suing for violation of creative rights. Pluto in Scorpio, so it seems to be like the promise of sexual revolution and spiritual gurus. There's nothing new under the sun, but now we just talk about it. This is the overall Scorpio approach to everything. It's like, oh, we just talk about that which was always there. There were always pedophiles, there were always sexist judges, there were always, there was always stigma around, sex work. People who say that they're going to remove your spiritual shame might always teach you something that will act that in a way that actually violates your sexual boundaries, in shaming you for not being evolved if you do not comply. So all of those things is like there's nothing new under the sun. Now we just talk about this. So it is a lot about exposing the sexual is exposing what people shouldn't be ashamed, removing shame around sexual practices that we shouldn't be ashamed about. Okay, think about the what was Esther Perel? She's not a Pluto Scorpio, but her erotic literacy. Okay, removing shame about this, but also exposing like why is it difficult, why was it difficult to bring pedophiles to justice in court at the Pluto Libra? Oh, because the judges are pedophiles. Oh, we knew that it always was, but the Pluto Scorpio is like, okay, now we have maybe the footage, maybe, and this is also something that can be considered sometimes as conspiracy theories proving right. The deepest, darkest conspiracies sometimes proving right. That is another. That's something that can also happen with Sag in a way and with Aquarius. Um, yeah, so it's rather simple. It's like we always knew it was always so. It's just that people didn't speak about it because it was hidden. And now with Scorpio, it's like, oh, we exposed those sexually related taboo, the power of procreation and control of procreation as well, um, and on all the the hierarchies in who to whom it is accessible. Okay, how accessible is safe sex? Or who do we shame for sexual diseases? Okay, not only gays get sex diseases, right? Um, Pluto in Sagittarius. This is an interesting one because what do we think about Sagittarius? It's freedom, it's expansion. What's Pluto? So freedom is slavery and slavery is freedom. The addictive power, why do you say psychedelics? I mean especially the mushrooms. Because the mushrooms, they go where the earth is stagnant. It's like the stagnant earth creates this environment for mushrooms to grow. And mushrooms are very Plutonian in nature. Okay? It's not exactly a plant. It's not exactly an animal. It's that in between. And they have transformative power. But with Pluto and Sag, it's also not just the power, but also the addiction, the obsession with that, with awakening. So the obsession with awakening, the obsession with being liberated, becoming something that jails or enslaves a person. Okay? And here the liberation is not sexual per se, it is more the liberation of consciousness, even though Jupiter is also sexual. And this is also because it's also traveling. So, how safe is to travel, let's say, as a woman? Or how safe is to travel to North Korea? We have all those travel videos that we see by people who travel alone and expose the reality of life in Yemen, in North Korea, in Iran, in Iraq, which is beautiful. And this exposure of what the media doesn't show you is not only Gemini, but when related to travel, this is Pluto and Sag. Okay, taking that freedom to extreme. So let's travel to North Korea and see, we managed to sneak into, I don't know, Pakistan, and let's see what happens, and let's broadcast it so people can see what's the actual reality of people who are living abroad, the actual culture that is different, the actual philosophy, and and then there is a sense of liberation in showing that. Um, so, and of course, preachers, religious people, the exposure of abuse in religion, exposure of ritual abuse in religious communities, not just ritual abuse in magic. Okay, abuse in magic, and again, that is back to Scorpio. Okay, so there are people who do magic that are abusive. Okay, it's not like we didn't know anything. Okay, Pluto in Capricorn, tables turn. This literally tables turn. I live in Israel, and there's a saying that if you want to get um, help from an institution of the government, you need to turn tables. So Pluto in Capricorn is literally tables turn. Slaves become masters, but will they use their power correctly? Are there any raped children underneath the pants of people in power position? The pedophile father figures being exposed. Okay, how pedophile were our founding fathers? Um, the In astrology, it's also the only traditional planets, please, no outer planets as rulers. When Pluto was in Capricorn, nobody wanted to talk about modern rulers. Suddenly, the rise of traditional astrology, but also, in the sense, the denouncing of the outer planets being rulers. No, Pluto does not rule anything. It's kind of like, and this is a Saturn ruled sign. Saturn was the top of the hierarchy. That was, the planet of the end of the galaxy. Now there are these outer planets, and Pluto and Saturn is like, okay, let's bring it back to what it was. Let's demote even Pluto from being powerful in a way. Um, and basically, it means hierarchy being turned upside down, pyramids being turned upside down, exposure of the structure of pyramids, okay, both in finances, Ponzi schemes, MLMs, but also in politics, also in everywhere where there is, I think it is called blue collar, this white collar, blue collar, I don't know, like those colors jobs. um, but literally everywhere, and also exposing the hierarchies between those bodies. Like, what is the power of the police versus the power of the army versus the power of the court versus the power of the government versus the power of the parliament versus the power of the president? Okay? Think about the law in the United States about prohibiting abortions in all states. This is the power of the Senate and, versus the power of the president, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so it's like the parliament is going against the president, and that exposes that, you know, that power of, hey, we thought the president is the strongest, but now the president is unable, and yet another time in American history where the president is not so competent because he has, other bodies working against him. But Pluto is also the guillotine, okay? And this is an especially important note because the guillotine was a humane way to rid of people who could endanger democracy during the transition years into French democracy during after the French Revolution. So the guillotine was used a lot, and think about it. It's not intended to make people suffer. It is intended to be public and to be visible and to make sure that people know that they will not be a threat to the new. Um, but there is also the bringing back of certain traditions with because it's Saturn ruled, so certain traditions are being brought back to be reassessed. Okay, think about, for astrology, traditional astrology being brought back to be reassessed. The power of tradition. But the traditions that are current might be demoted. So, and of course, it is involving a fiscal financial system. Um, so this is Pluto and Capricorn. It's a rise into power, but it also is there comes a time where the person is now in a power position and they have to see how do they use their power, how do they use it correctly. So it's about understanding that you are already in power, because some people might not get it. They might think they're still disempowered when they're in power. um, and it is also finding your power, understanding what happens when you are at the top of a certain hierarchy, and the change of the structural changes needed is for your role in society to be demoted. Okay, do we let the younger people bring about the changes that they came to bring about, and so on and so forth? So the abuse of power of father figures, of founding fathers, do we let change be? Do we let the course of history be? Do we let other people climb the social ladder? Do we allow ourselves to be demoted? Can we withstand being demoted but still existing? We're not going to go into complete lack of power. Pluto in Aquarius. This is the power of the intelligent, the self taught, and the masses. When the humanitarian is abusive, when the researcher is the problem. So before I move on to gravity and so, um, I've mentioned Pluto in Aquarius for a couple of times, and think about the practical use of philosophy of science. How do we know that we know? What is dogmatic about of requiring everything to be logical and sciencey? The power of research is finding patterns in that which seems chaotic. Okay, so advances in chaos. What did you say? Chaos magic, but yes, it's absolutely chaos magic. Um, the technology of magic being used, put to practice, big technology. Gravity as a wave, movements and their power, and the power of motion, um, measuring something as wave, exploration, exposure of hidden movements and the hidden deeds in tribes and communities. So hidden movements can also be in static, something that is static, because Aquarius is one of the fixed signs. And so exploration of static states and the movement within static states, or the static within something that moves, um, uh, and like static electricity, something like that. And exploration of hidden movements and the hidden deeds in tribes and communities, because Aquarius is so much about the community and the power of community and humanitarian people. Pluto is going to expose the Plutonian facets of these humanitarian people, the cultish aspects of that, the leaders that we're not supposed to have, who is leading anarchistic communities. Yes, there is such a thing. Okay, what power do these people have? Pluto itself being observed by new technology, revolutionary view on Pluto. Okay, um, and here, how do we know that we know? Okay, new technology changes our way to observe. So what we knew about Pluto changes, and so the dogmas we held around it might change. Um, but then, who is the observer? Okay, who is the observer? The power of the observer, and this is why I guess people will say quantum field. They're not wrong, because the power of the observer to change a reality on a very physical level. Okay, so in terms of magic or the psychic powers being expressed, is the ability to utilize waves and frequencies of the nervous system. Okay, power over the nervous system. Um, the power that waves and frequencies have over our nervous system. And so on and so forth. And then what do we discover when we look at Pluto closer? Could we actually travel to Pluto by the end of this transit? I don't know. Okay. And last but not least, Pluto in Pisces. So for me, it was like, remember those nuke bombs in the ocean? Imagine setting off one on a gas drilling site. So tsunamis, oneness, and the power of being one. Perhaps I shouldn't have said this that quickly, um, but Pluto in Pisces might also be nuking, like neutralizing nuclear. whatever is left of the world, you know? So it can actually mean something like that because Pisces is a Neptunian ruled. It's the dissolution of the power of Pluto, okay, or the illusion of that dissolution. This can also mean the power of waves, tsunami, okay, grand tsunamis. Um, Oneness and the power of being one, or the illusion of our being one and the power of that illusion on us. Um, so that was a very quick, just very quick random thoughts in wow, really quick, 40 minutes on Pluto across the zodiac. This one could really be like, 40 hours. So there's a lot to add to this skeleton. Years, people, events, history, whatnot. And feel free to use this YouTube video and just post, related links, related videos, related literature, your own literature. You can also, write me if you want to collaborate, if you want to add to this, or you want to have sequels to this, where we can record, Pluto related videos. This is absolutely wonderful because I noticed most of what was written was about Pluto generations, and that's a very wonderful and important knowledge to have. But I actually wanted to go to the core, like, what is the core thing that Pluto transforms in every sign on a mundane level or on a cosmology level, and not necessarily only, the human lives, because in the human lives, Pluto in our human lives is gonna go, you know, you none of us is likely to get to their Pluto opposition. So let alone Pluto return. So we're very unlikely to see Pluto across the zodiac in our personal lives. And while it's very useful to watch Pluto generations on the path of the evolution of the soul, it's also interesting to observe it from a more general cosmological and mundane perspective. So this one could really be filled with, the scientific advancement, with the psychic advancement, with the magical advancement that were reached in each era, and so on and so forth. Um, but that's my first contribution to Sun and Venus ingressing into Pluto in my ninth house. So little Pluto teaching, a tiny Pluto teaching, a tiny vlog, and let's see what this transit may bring for, you know, this coming month. So I wish you easy eclipse season. Hone in on the benefits from the Kazimi. Know that what you're about to lose ties with might be related to allowing the benefits of the Kazimi Venus to materialize in your life. If this was about relationships or communities or deciding to be with communities that are mutually benefic, then the eclipse can disturb you with, letting go of that which is, painful but needed to let go of. So if you're watching this um, before the October eclipse, then I wish you easy eclipse season. And any time after that, then um, you're past that already. So I'm Tali Share on Twitter, Shirley Youngblood on Instagram. I do readings. You're gonna have to contact me for that, and I also do Spirit of Matter, where I talk about astrology, cosmology, magic, and whatnot. Um, and this is also where I do collaborations. So if you would like to collaborate with me and do a joint video joint venture, then I'm available for that. You just have to, use that Twitter and or that Instagram to contact me, and I'll see it. Then, bye bye to the next video.